Good morning, everyone. I'm just checking all my settings. Do I have them right? Will this be the first solid ground where I actually get everything right? So you can help me out if you're logging in, if you're seeing this live on your social media now, so to speak, give me a wave. Perhaps just message a hello. Tell me if my microphone is still on mute and tell me where you are. I'm always very curious of who's on, whereabouts in New Zealand, and in fact overseas. I've received a few messages from people overseas who follow this, which is fantastic. So hello to you all, and welcome or welcome back to Solid Ground. It is wonderful to have you all here. We stream across multiple platforms, so some of you will be seeing this on the Family First Facebook page. Others of you will be on my social media page on Facebook or on YouTube, on LinkedIn. I think we might even be on Twitter. We're across quite a few. But look, if you are following us and you would like to comment, and I love your comments, I love your questions. If you have any, please get in touch. The best way to do that is actually through the Facebook Live on Family First's page. At the moment, and I'm sorry for those who are regular, you know my lines on this. At the moment, we can't funnel all the feeds from all the channels into one place. So we have to pick. So if you want to comment, if you've got any thoughts or questions you want to raise, then go to the Family First page. The live is operating there, and put in your comments. It'll be marvelous to have you. So I'm just going to check that I've actually turned things on, because I can see some comments, but not. I see what I've done. There we go. Now I can see. Almost perfect. So look, as I say, if you've got comments, thoughts, questions on any topic, by the way, not just what I'm looking to discuss this morning, just fire them through. I'll do my best to answer them while we're here, because that's part of Solid Ground. As you know, it's a double entendre, it's a pun, it's a play on words. Solid Ground is all about discussing matters of the day, some political, some ethical, whatever, from a good foundation. A foundation of ethics, a foundation of faith, and a foundation of, well, I would argue, good philosophy. But it's also, as you know, solid ground, and as the little icon indicates, is a bit of a pun on a good ground of coffee, or a cup of tea if you prefer, or some hot water and lemon, whatever it may be. I can see, well, actually, to illustrate the point, Chris has already made this comment. He's got a coffee in hand. So do I, Chris. And good morning. Lovely to have you on. And good morning to everybody else. I see we've got Rosie as well. Good morning. Rosie's actually asking about one of the topics I'm going to talk to today, which is around Gahraman. So I will touch on that. I will say with a bit of sensitivity as well. That's not a reflection on anybody else's thoughts. But I do have some thoughts around what is happening there, and also some of the behaviours around it, which I think raises some questions. So definitely got all that in hand. So welcome again. It is good to have you here. Look, a few things I thought I'd touch on today. One will be around the Gahraman, but I thought I'd actually start with this little story that has popped up. It's on a few platforms, and I don't know how many of you watch television or are forced occasionally to watch television, but One New Zealand, so that's Vodafone, now have a new ad where this young man here is seeking out his adoptive parents. And, you know, part of the narrative is that he's clearly Māori, and he's married to, I think, it's a ginger-haired European woman. Oh, not married, sorry, his mum is a ginger-haired, I think, woman, and the dad's a much older European. It's just clearly he's clearly not their biological son, and so then he goes to seek out his adoptive parents. Now, a couple of very quick points. Why I think it's quite positive actually starts in a strange way from how this, not actually bad article, it's by a lecturer at one of the universities. But what she's suggesting is that there's a lot more complications in adoption, which is, that's a fair point. She's arguing that, of course you should know who your biological parents are. And so you can imagine she's discussing the wider complexities of adoption. But why I thought this was a good story, and it's something which, I don't know if One New Zealand's thought about this, the academic who wrote this piece has not, but it's profoundly pro-life, actually. The very story itself is a young man who was born. And in fact, if you watch the ad, there's a moment where the young man in this picture here finds his birth mother in Scotland. As Rosie's noting, the young lad is looking for his birth parents. That's quite right. So he ends up in, I think it looks like something like Scotland. And as she reminisces, it's not an X-rated ad, I might add, but as she reminisces about how this young man came to be born, it's actually celebrating life. It's mostly biologically accurate without, as I say, being X-rated. So I just thought, at its heart, this is actually quite a pro-life ad, whether they realised it or not. And yes, there's issues around adoption. I'll let you into a secret. I'm adopted myself. So I feel I can at least have an opinion. Well, actually, anyone can have an opinion on these topics. I'm not one of these people who says that because you're one sex or the other, or you're not this or not that, you can't have an opinion. You can have an opinion on whatever you want. And in this case, though, I am someone who's adopted. So I've got, I don't know, is it a vested interest? But I just thought it was a lovely story, that narrative underpinning all of this, the attempt at humour to sell more cell phones aside, it's profoundly pro-life. This is a life. Someone was born or created and born, and actually this mother in the ad has ultimately made the decision to adopt the child. And I just think that is wonderful. The other thing within it is the lecturer who wrote the piece talks rightly that biology is important. So the whole subtext being that you can't just adopt someone without them knowing their, their biological genetic heritage. Personally, I want to share from my side, I'm actually indifferent. I don't know, as I often go and, well, no, that's not correct. When I go and see my doctor, not all that often, fortunately, I'm in good health, or as a friend of mine would say, you're in rude health. It's a bit of a lottery for me. In other words, I'm not too fussed. Might sound a bit fatalistic to some, but when they ask for your family history, or do you have a history of this or that, I actually don't know. And I'll be completely blunt with you guys online. I don't care. It's just what's going to be is going to be. So, I think the lecturer in the article does make a good point. As in, for most people, they do want to understand their biological reality, where they come from. For some, like myself, it's not so much of a big deal. But then I thought, we've got all the culture wars, as they talk about, raging at the moment. But here is this lecturer, this academic expert, saying that biology is important. And you know what? I think I agree. I think actually the likes of Roe Edge at Protect Women's Sport agree. I think Penny at Let Kids Be Kids agree. I know Bob and the team at Family First agree. Biology is important. So I would really encourage this lecturer, this writer, to get in touch with all of those pressing, particularly within the trans movement, that say that actually biology is not important because we can just switch backwards and forwards at women, particularly when it comes to children. So there's a little bit of an edge, if you will, on this. But I just thought it was striking. Adoption is good. That this young man was born, was allowed to live. I just think it's a nice narrative. And whether the lecturer in writing or not understands by talking about the reality of biology, it actually is accurate. And grounds this ad, I think, in the reality which we all share, and that would do very, very well to our various activists out there who believe that you can change your biological sex at whim, which of course is completely nuts. Charmaine asks, or states, adopted people wonder why they were given up. Yes, they can or they do. Everyone is different, I'd have to say. So I come from a family that has a few adoptees in it, and I've dealt with different adopted people. Look, it's a continuum, to be honest, Charmaine, because I can't speak for all, but for some, they absolutely want to know who their biological parents are. They want to know all and everything. They want to reunite with their half-brothers and sisters, all of that. And they want to deeply understand why. And some feel it as a rejection. Why did my mother in particular, but why did my mum and dad let me go? Then there are people probably like myself who are sort of on another end of the continuum who are exceptionally grateful to their birth parents for making the decision to let me go. I can't fully fathom it, but I see it as quite a loving decision. So as I understand things, because I haven't actually met my birth parents, I see my parents that brought me up from almost day 3. So long and short, a huge loving action, a sense that they didn't have the ability, the means, for whatever reason. Because to be honest, I do partly know, but I might keep some things to myself. They couldn't look after me, and they thought for this wee little boy, born in Otahu, that actually the best chance of life was adoption. And I am incredibly grateful to them for that. I mean, who knows what my life could have been like? Who could have been absolutely amazing? It could have been filled with trials, but that's life in general, isn't it? So for me, Charmaine, to illustrate the point, I know why I was let go, and I'm grateful for that because it's actually given new opportunities, I hope, for everyone. For my birth mother, obviously for my parents who were wanting to have children but could not, and opportunities for me. So I think that's important to say, but it is a continuum. It really is. And as I said, there are some whose real sense of identity is linked to who the birth parents are. It's not so strong for me. I'm not worried about my lineage, whakapapa, or biology, but everyone's different, and so we've got to approach, if you will, every adoption very carefully. Nicola asks, let's have a look, what happens when parents won't need to be identified? There'll be no knowledge. Yeah, so I'm not laughing at you, Nicola. You're right on the money. These are the inherent mad contradictions which are flying about the modern progressive world. Nicola, you've nailed it. Actually, you've absolutely nailed it. So for those who go, what? I don't quite get it. So we've got the article that I just referenced where the academic, I think rightly overall, says, hey, look, we should acknowledge the importance of biology. And in general terms, I think all of us, most of us would agree with that. But again, Nicola's made the point, if I can bring it back up, well, if you don't need to identify who the actual parents are on the birth certificate, then sorry, people texting me, but unrelated, it's a builder. But as Nicola's pointing out, we've got this push at the moment that actually there can be all forms of adoptions or dynamics where actually birth parents aren't required. We've already got the situation where the father doesn't need to be put on the birth certificate. And a lot of people who would be advocating for the importance of biology, some of the first say, well, no, the father is not really important. They don't need to be on a birth certificate. So you can see how this gets all very complicated. And it's not law at the moment. I want to be clear about it. It's not law at the moment. But there is also some complications around surrogacy. I know some of the proposals in Parliament made life a little bit complicated, shall we say. So around all of that. So yeah, which side are we going to land on is probably what I'm trying to get at here. And I think it's where Nicola is going as well. So excellent comment, Nicola, you did right. Where's the consistency? If biology is important, then that has implications not only for adoption, but it definitely does around what are supposedly trans rights. And it certainly has an issue around how we approach defining what a woman is, what a man is, what's on the birth certificate, who's the actual parents or not. So a fascinating topic. Speaking of topics, I'm going to do a quick promo for you, and then I'll be right back.
The Forum on the Family is one of the premier family conferences held each year with international and national speakers and political leaders. Hosted by Family First New Zealand, the forum brings together a national network of family-focused organisations, scholars, lobby groups, leaders and groups who are part of a growing movement for social change to bring New Zealand to a point where families are strengthened, marriage is honoured, life is protected and religious freedom is defended. This year's conference will again be held at the Dewdrop Event Centre in Manukau City, not too far from the Auckland Airport, on Friday, 5th of July. This year's theme is Protecting the Next Generation. It's time for all of us to push back against the harmful agendas and ideologies being targeted at our children, including the ones in the womb. And once again, we have an amazing lineup of speakers from the US, Australia and New Zealand. Now, as we did last year, on the Thursday night before the forum, we're hosting a gala celebration dinner with the theme Independence Day. Well, it is on the 4th of July, but independence is also significant for Family First. We'll explain more at the dinner. You'll also get to meet and eat with our other international speakers and hear them in a special Q&A on the night. I want to invite you to this year's Forum on the Family. It's the highlight of the year and you don't want to miss it. Arrange to be there. Book your flights today. Gather your friends. If you're concerned for our culture, our country and our families, you may be saying, well, what can I do? Step 1, attend the Forum on the Family. Last year was another sellout, so don't delay. Go to our website forumonthefamily.nz for all the information you need. Register today. Don't miss this important family conference. Let's build a culture that protects our children, the next generation. Go to forumonthefamily.nz. Register today.
Well, there you go. If you want your dose of good thinking, consistent thinking, that's probably one of the big things you're going to constantly hear from me is about consistency. In fact, I've just done a podcast. I can't say who. I think it's quite an exciting guest in the pro-life space. He's based in the United Kingdom, but a very deep thinker, a young thinker actually, well certainly young compared to me, where consistency is just so vitally important. So come along to Forum on the Family. It's next week. Thursday night we have the dinner, so if you'd like to have a nice bite to eat and some casual company, please do. And then all of Friday, of course, is the forum, an array of guests from detransitioners right through to someone I'm quite excited to hear from. He's coming in online, is Dr. Jonathan Haidt. He's a social psychologist and he's written a really good book of late, which I've referenced before, The Anxious Generation. He talks about around his basic premise, which I think is quite intuitive to most of us, is that we over-regulate the physical or the outside world for our young people these days. He argues we over-regulate it, and by that he means, well, think about it yourself. Do you let your kids climb trees or walk to school? And none of this is accusational, by the way, but he's saying, look, we regulate all of that so highly, our playgrounds are almost made from cotton wool, and yet we don't, in general, as a society, regulate the online space. So our young people are on their devices accessing all sorts of material, and he says that this is ultimately leading to an anxious generation. So he's coming in on the forum, so a wonderful lineup, check it out. Gratuitous advertising, but I think it's going to be great. Now, a couple of you have already messaged about this little case. So my former colleague Gahraman's up, as you know, on shoplifting charges, fairly serious at one level. I mean, we're not talking high level, but pretty serious. But I wanted to make a couple of comments because a couple of things for me don't quite ring true, and part of it's actually to do with the watermelon that you can see on her dress, and you're going, the what? So there's a watermelon. There's a watermelon on the dress. It's actually one of the more subtle symbols for the Palestinian cause. But I want to raise that because what's happened, so she's up for sentencing at the moment, and we've got to respect, of course, that it's up to the judge to make the decision, first time offence and all of that. In fact, the judge has made it clear that she won't be going to prison, which personally I think is appropriate. First time offending for shoplifting, I don't think, generally speaking, should require someone to go to prison, but the judge is considering what the next steps are, and for her this has actually got some pretty serious implications, because if she does get a conviction, it affects her potential to get back into law and so forth. So again, pretty serious, and this is where, well, we have judges. But why I wanted to bring up the case, the other point I should make is one should act with empathy in this too. I know her. I work very closely alongside her actually in the Foreign Affairs Committee, and don't agree on much, but respected our time working together. And there is a part of me who actually feels sorry for her. But I've ummed and ahed about raising this because I thought one of the striking things is we've got the mental health card being played again. Now, whether it's the right to be played on, I don't know. But her defence lawyer yesterday was saying that she's got PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, linked to having been living in Iran until I think the 1990s, I think born in the early 80s and left with her family in the 90s. And then all the stresses of Parliament. Now, with the latter, we know there were some pretty vile aspects directed at her. And the judge makes a big thing, it's a stressful life. Well, that's true, but I have to say, it's a stressful life for everyone. But I suspect likes of Gahraman's got a lot more opprobrium than people like myself, but I don't want to overcook that one or undercook what a lot of others experience. But what got me was all this talk about PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, enormous stress, and linked to her work, her activism, was attracting lots of tension. Okay, then why, as she appears in court, is it well choreographed and is ensuring that front and centre is a continued piece of activism, in this case wearing a watermelon, which is the sign of Palestinian supposed resistance. Now, I'm not intending to drag us down the rabbit hole of Palestine and Hamas and Israel, but I would think that if you're going to make a claim that you're suffering from the likes of PTSD linked to your activism, that you probably would want to dial back your activism. Now, I want to be really, really clear. People are allowed to be passionate and to activate, for want of a better term, on the topics they want to. But I think it's harder, not impossible, but it's harder to reconcile that you have PTSD or you're having these major mental health struggles when you continue to pursue them in a very public way. In other words, something doesn't quite add up here for me. That's my personal opinion. That's how I read it. But I would think, and this, by the way, is affected, I can think of Todd Muller in the National Party, again, talking about his mental health journey, but at some points not backing away. The best thing you can do often in these cases, if you are under enormous stress, is disengage. And I suppose that's one of the underlying thoughts that I've had across multiple people, not just Gahraman's, is if you are suffering from major mental health issues, and in her case related to activism, such as not the pineapple, don't know why I've got pineapple on my mind, watermelons, then back away from it. And so there's just something's not quite ringing true. Something's just not quite ringing true for me in all of this. Now I can see a few comments. Here's one from Christine, and what have we got here? I'm just changing the font so I can see this all. There, look at me. So I'm quite proud of myself as I'm just fixing things here. So I don't think she'll be able to hide under a rock in the UK. Well, that's true. See, one of the things actually they're pitching is that she's got a very short-term research fellowship at one of the universities, which good for her. It's good for her, but yeah, there's a little bit of suspicious side of me as well that it's just very, very short term. Again, you can imagine to the judge, hey, judge, I've got this option coming up, so we need to, let me off. Charmaine cuts to the chase. So pretty blatant. Amanda's a bit more robust on this. Look, there's lots of inconsistency. Well, not inconsistency, it's possibly a bit too strong. It's interesting how elements of life are played, to get around Iran or not, and so forth. But for myself, it's one needs to be cautious about getting too personal. As I said, I had a relatively good working relationship, I thought, even though we disagreed on just about everything. But I think at the same time, it's just this. I've probably belaboured it too long, for no other reason than I just don't reconcile how you can claim that you are suffering immense stress or trauma related to activism and yet continue to be exceptionally active in that space. Hey, last couple of points. Bob, as in Microscopy, put this up yesterday. Well, he did it smarter than me. He put it as a video. I've just done it as text because I'm lazy. The charity sector is under review. So the Minister of Finance, in fact, National sadly indicated it sounded like an off-the-cuff comment a few months back, but they want to look at the charity sector. And the underlying narrative here is that it's twofold. One, there's some within this coalition government that don't believe that religion has any charitable purpose. So being a Greenpeace or Amnesty activist is perfectly fine, but believing in religion and seeking to be, charitable to help people is not. And a second underlying narrative is a belief that some charities, so they will often point to likes of sanitarium, are not paying their fair share of taxes. And if you understand the sanitarium situation, sanitarium is a charity, and of course it's a business and it's operating. A business is operating against others, so they're arguing there's an advantage there. But I think it's striking that, and sad in my opinion, that the government's looking to do this review. I would say often, having been in politics, if people start a review, they've already got their answer, and I would expect this review to come back, and if not, having a crack at some charities, how they're going to draw the line within the religious framework, I better add. They're going to have a bit of a crack. And all of this is a little bit prophetic, for want of a better word. When Family First was deregistered a short time back, Bob, the founder, was very clear that this was just the first of many organisations that would be targeted. And I think it's fair to say, as an observer at the time, many poo-pooed that view, or his view. But he's right, because here comes the government. They've been thinking about this for years. I've had to push back against it in the past. It's seen as easy money. It's going to be seen as easy money, and just a hope that the churches will, in particular, because this will also affect mosques and temples if you're a Sikh or a Hindu, they're coming after you. They want your money. They don't see faith as having any benefit to society, either the belief itself or that the belief actually leads to good work. So quite sad, I think. Quite sad. Not related, but you've had this story this week as well. Why am I putting this up here? I mean, look, we still have the violence and crime in society. Positively, the government's putting more police on the beat, which is good to see. But I'm putting this up here because obviously Facebook Lives remain. I think and by this I mean we'll be able to reference back to it. I sadly think it's only a matter of time where further people are going to die. We had obviously the tragic case last year, I think it was, in Sandringham. But I think it's only a matter of time between a sword like this, or someone's going to pull out a shotgun and someone's going to get killed. The news that was breaking last night was around this. So it's good and bad. It's good and bad. I'm probably going to write a Substack on this one, but I thought I'd share it with you. So you remember in the budget, the government seemed to forget, for reasons none of us completely understand, excuse me, forgot its campaign promise to fund 13 new drugs. And so there's been a scramble over the last, month to work out a way through. So yesterday the government very positively has announced $600 million. This is over 4 years. Most announcements, if you understand, in politics are over 4 years. So this is a massive new spend, and that's to be applauded. In fact, it's almost double the number of cancer drugs. Almost double the number of cancer drugs that were promised. I think they're promising now 26 versus 13, and they've found the money. So look, on the very, very positive side of the ledger, it's great that a campaign promise has been fulfilled. It's really good to see these new drugs come online. Most of them are what they call immunotherapies. Got to get my tongue around that. I think the likes, you might have heard the name Keytruda. It's really good. If you're a cancer patient, look, I've been on the oncology ward for weeks, as you might have heard in previous Solid Grounds because of a family member of mine. These drugs are incredible. So kudos to the government, really positive if you're a cancer sufferer. But, and there's always a but, the budget's already done. So it's not as if there's 600 million floating around. So long and short, guys, this is money that's been promised against next year's budget. Okay, next year's budget. So what we've got, and it's always hard to get this distinction, isn't it? Because, of course, drugs for patients is a good thing. But it's not been spent from money this year. It's been banked, if you will, against the next budget. And the next budget's only given what's called an operating allowance or a discretion of about two and a bit billion. So long and short, they've already committed, the government now, by funding these drugs, has already committed about a fifth of next year's budget. Already gone. So this is like a very, very early pre-commitment to the 2025 budget. Now again, if you're a cancer sufferer or you've got someone in your family who's got cancer, none of that makes a difference. And I'd be the same as you. It makes no difference. You want access to the drugs. It's good that they're going to be funded. But if we just take a step back from the financial side of things, there's a big red flag in my head. $600 million already committed out of next year's budget. On top of that, a budget this year that is spending more than the Labour government, that's going into higher debt than the Labour government had. Look, long and short, guys, we cannot afford to keep spending like this. It's as simple as that. Really, that's probably what I should have said from the start. We just can't afford to spend like this. Hey, last really quick point, because I think it's more of a good story. Look this up for two reasons. One, Laubin, or Robin, if he uses his English name. It's a wonderful story. He's Catholic in his case, but he fled the Chinese consulate here in Auckland. His story is amazing. If you look this up on stuff, you'll get a bit of a hint of what happened to him and why, but also a remarkable story of how he managed to get his family out of China and his his son's grandparents. It's an amazing story in and of itself, but I'd also say, if you read it, you'll see that I was involved. It's something actually I was proud to be involved with. Laubin is an amazing man, and it's an amazing story. Of what he's achieved, but also to get his family out of this authoritarian regime. He can't go into hell, nor can I, but I think it's God-given. It's a gift that his family is able to be reunited. So I think, a positive story to finish on. A couple of comments that are coming through. Get tougher on crime, absolutely. In fact, you'll see in the papers today, there's talk of beginning to control a little bit of to control a little bit of what judges can do around sentencing. There's concern in the current government that judges discount sentences too much. Charmaine's right, the Taxpayer Union, they've actually done some good work of you'd be amazed at how much money is getting thrown out. And Charmaine's also right on the money here. Bob will be very happy with this, as will I. We need more people to be seen as charitable, not trying to reduce it. So guys, the last few points from me, as you know, always encouraging you. There's a whole lot of programs that Family First run. There's Straight Talk on a Monday night. It's a panel program like this show. It's live. There's Pulse Point. Good Lord, every time I'm dealing with P's, I seem to get tongue-tied. My colleague Tumby does a weekly wrap-up of usually about 4 to 5 stories, so check out Pulse Point. If you don't know already, and I couldn't get the right screenshot, they all look very serious, but Bob does usually every morning a Mick blog, and recently he interviewed Winston Peters. So as you can see, the TV or media work that Family First is lead across a wide range of topics is becoming, my term here, efficacious, becoming effective. So you now even have the Deputy Prime Minister calling in, which is fantastic. Gratuitous advertising from my side. So as you might know, I do these lives. I do Straight Talk with Bob. We actually have another program coming up. That's going to be on a Thursday afternoon. That's just a little teaser. But I also do a 2-hour radio show with RCR. So last week I had Toby Young. We're talking about free speech. That was really, really good. If you're interested in why free speech is important, sat down with Ashley Church as well. Some of you will know him. We talk about the housing crisis. He's a little bit of a contrarian in this space. He says that actually the statistics and the reality are not what a lot of politicians and commentators are saying. So you can always jump onto my show. It's from 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. As some of you know, I do Substack. It's like an online blog called On Point. This was my one from last week. Do we even have a far left? If you follow the news, you hear the shrill comments all the time about these far right, but we never seem to hear anything about the far left. Where is it? Doesn't seem to exist. And obviously we had the forum on the family, so please check that out. So look, there's just no shortage, guys. There is just no shortage of content. So I'm going to leave it there. The morning is young. I've actually got to go and record some more podcasts. So that's probably my final, pitch. We also do something called Family Matters. It's usually a weekly podcast with an array of guests on a whole range of topics that matter to families. So I'm just going to go and record one of those. So in the meantime, thank you for joining me as always. It's always a delight. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks for joining Solid Ground.